The wind tore across the high plains like a curse too old to name. It whistled through the barren fence posts, over broken patches of prairie brush, and into the bones of the land itself. Snow, driven hard and slantwise, needled the skin and bit at what little warmth the world had left. And yet, in the silence of it all, there they were, 3 figures bound and helpless beneath a darkening sky. Laura McKinnon hadn't moved in hours. Her back was pressed to a cracked cedar post, wrists lashed behind her with coarse hemp rope that had gnawed raw into her skin. Blood, dried and dark, stained the cuff of her tattered wool sleeve. Her breath came slow and shallow, crystallizing in the frigid air. A single boot was missing. Her face bore the bruises of refusal, not submission. Beside her, one on either side, were her sons. Jamie, 10, was slumped forward, rope cutting into his skinny arms. A gash ran down his cheek, angry and swollen. Tommy, just 7, trembled uncontrollably, unable to make a sound around the gag tied cruelly over his mouth. His tiny fists clutched a worn cloth rabbit, head flopping sideways where it had once been sewn tighter. Nothing moved. Not even the crows. Only the snow, falling steady now, began to bury them inch by inch. They were too tired to struggle, too cold to panic. That terrible part had already passed. Laura's eyes blinked open, slowly. Her head lolled to one side. She tried to speak, but her throat cracked and no words came. She searched for her boys, her vision bleary. Still breathing. Still here. That had to count for something. They hadn't meant to die like this. Certainly not today. That morning, they'd been together in the kitchen. She'd been slicing dried apples into a pot of boiling oats. The stove hissed. Jamie was teasing Tommy about the way he buttoned his coat. There had been laughter, real and warm. And then the knock came. 4 men. Cold-eyed. Faces dirty with soot and soot-blackened stubble. Not ranchers. Not neighbors. Raiders. The kind that preyed on the in-between places, where lawmen rarely rode and justice moved slower than the snow. They weren't there for trade. They didn't need warmth. They needed to hurt someone. She'd tried to bargain, offered them supplies, even the mule, but they wanted more. Her. Her food. Her boys' fear. They took what they wanted and left them for the snow to finish. Now, Laura stared up at the sky through tears frozen to her cheeks, wondering if this was how it ended. She didn't pray. Not anymore. Not since Samuel died outside Carthage with a bullet in his spine and her name on his lips. God hadn't listened then. Why would he now? Jamie groaned. Tommy whimpered, a broken, muffled sound. Laura tried to move, just enough to reach them, to brush their hair or whisper some final word, but her body had no strength left. Then came the sound. Bootsteps. Slow. Crunching. Steady, deliberate, coming through the trees behind them. Laura blinked. Her breath hitched. She turned her head as far as the rope would allow. He emerged from the timber like a story conjured by frost and legend. Tall. Weathered. A long coat snapped at his knees in the wind. A wide-brimmed hat sat low over eyes she couldn't quite see. Across his back, a battered rifle. His face, half covered by a rough wool scarf, held no expression. Just silence. He did not run. He did not call out. He walked with purpose and calm, as though he'd seen bodies bound to fences 100 times before. He stopped 3 paces away. Laura tried to speak again. Failed. The man looked at her first. Then Jamie. Then Tommy. He crouched beside Tommy, slicing the rope clean with a hunting knife so sharp it made no sound. The boy fell into his arms with a gasp. Then Jamie. Then Laura. Her limbs buckled as the tension left her. She collapsed against him. He caught her. Lifted her effortlessly. Laura expected him to speak. To say something, anything. But his silence was complete. Without looking back, the stranger turned and carried them all into the storm. He moved as if he knew exactly where to go. Branches lashed at them as they passed through a thicket of black pines. Laura drifted in and out of awareness. Each jostle sparked pain down her spine, but her arms were around her sons again. She could feel Jamie's heartbeat against her chest. Tommy whimpered into her collar. The man's grip was firm but not cruel. One arm held her. The other supported the boys tucked under his coat like precious cargo. After what felt like hours, they reached a low rise. Beyond it, a hollow carved into the side of a rocky bluff, half hidden by brambles. The man ducked inside. Dry. Cold, but dry. The floor was packed earth, and remnants of old campfire soot marked the center. He laid them down gently, one by one. Then he set to work. He built a fire from scratch. Flint. Birch bark. Twigs. Each movement practiced. Efficient. Soon, a thin ribbon of smoke curled upward and warmth began to creep back into their limbs. He unrolled a buffalo hide. Wrapped it around the children. Then draped his coat over Laura. She tried to speak, her lips cracked and voice a ghost. Why? He didn't answer. He just moved to the cave's entrance and sat, rifle across his knees, watching the woods. Laura stared at his back. Who was he? Why had he come? He'd said nothing. Not a word. But he had carried them. And in that act, something had changed. Hours passed. The fire glowed low. Tommy was the first to sleep, clutching the rabbit. Jamie followed. Their cheeks pink now, not deathly pale. Laura forced herself to sit up, slowly, painfully. Her ribs screamed. Her ankle throbbed. She pulled the coat tighter and cleared her throat. Thank you. Still, no response. She studied him. His silhouette unmoving. She couldn't see his face, only the side of it, the hard line of his jaw, a scar trailing down his cheek. He wasn't young. But he wasn't old, either. Late 30s, maybe. Maybe 40. And alone. He didn't belong to anyone. That much was clear. Some men walk into your life with songs and promises. Others walk in like this, quiet, wind-worn, half-shadow. And somehow, in their silence, they speak louder than any preacher's sermon. Outside, the wind shifted. The storm lightened. But something in the air said more would come. Danger wasn't past. It was circling. Waiting. Laura watched the stranger's shoulders tighten. She lay back down, one arm around her son's. And for the first time in 2 days, she slept. Not because it was safe. But because someone was finally watching the dark for her. The fire crackled softly, throwing amber light against the stone walls of the cave. Shadows danced across the man's face, but his eyes remained still, fixed on something beyond the entrance, somewhere deep in the black timber. His body rested, but his mind did not. Every part of him was alert, shoulders slightly raised, jaw set firm, hand never far from the rifle laid neatly across his lap. He hadn't slept, not since he'd carried them out of the snow. Laura stirred beneath the buffalo hide. Her hand searched blindly until it found Tommy's chest, rising and falling in a rhythm steady enough to soften her own panic. Jamie lay curled beside his brother, a thin line of drool staining the side of his mouth, one hand still gripping the hem of her skirt. They were warm. Still alive. The ache in her body was dull now, replaced by the numbness of disbelief. She could smell pine pitch and wood smoke. She could hear the man breathing, not quite shallow, not quite deep, like a slow wind through tall grass. She pushed herself up, wincing. Her voice, brittle from cold and fear, broke the silence. You saved us. The man didn't look back. I don't know why. Still nothing. Laura studied the back of his head, the way he held himself so still. She tried again. Are you hurt? His head tilted, just slightly, as if acknowledging the question. But no words came. She reached for the canteen he'd left near the fire, took a sip. The water was sharp with metal but cold and clean. Her throat thanked her for it. She took another sip, then offered it toward him. He didn't move. But a moment later, he turned slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. His were gray. Storm gray. Not cold, exactly, but weathered, like something that had seen too much and chose to remember everything anyway. He didn't take the canteen. Instead, he pointed at the boys. Rest, he said. One word. Rough. Measured. Laura nodded. But her curiosity only deepened. Do you have a name? The man turned back to the forest. After a long pause, he answered, Doesn't matter. She tried to smile. Might to me. Silence again. Laura leaned back against the cave wall and looked at the fire. The flames flicked lazily, casting light on her son's sleeping faces. They looked so much like Samuel. Jamie had his chin. Tommy had his eyes, round and searching, even in sleep. A lump formed in her throat. She pressed her lips together, tried not to let the memory come rushing in. Not now. Not while this man, this stranger, sat just feet away. She looked at him again. Studied his hands. Scarred. Fingers thick from years of labor. There was an old burn on the back of his right hand, a faded brand, likely military. Cavalry maybe. Or worse. You were a soldier. This time, the man didn't flinch. Laura went on, her voice quiet but certain. I know the way you move. My husband had it. The way he'd scan a tree line before he even stepped off the porch. The stranger didn't confirm or deny. He simply sat with the silence between them. I lost him 2 years ago, she said softly. Shot in the back while driving cattle through Missouri. They never even took the horses, just left him in the mud. She swallowed. Thought about leaving too, after that. Not the boys, just this place. The world. But they needed me. And I wasn't ready to let them grow up not knowing what good looked like. She paused. I don't know if you believe in God, but sometimes I think he doesn't listen anymore. Or maybe he never did. She glanced at the man. But you came. He finally turned, just enough for her to see the edge of an expression, something flickering behind the quiet. Grief? Recognition? I heard a scream, he said. Laura blinked. Didn't know what I'd find, he added. Could have been a trap. She held his gaze. And you came anyway. The fire cracked. The man shrugged once, barely perceptible. Didn't have anywhere else to be. They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, not cold, just quiet. The kind of silence that's earned, not imposed. When morning came, pale light leaked into the cave. Laura woke first, stiff and sore but steady. She moved toward the mouth of the shelter, saw the snow had stopped, though clouds still brooded low over the hills. The tracks from their escape had already been buried. Clean slate. Or a trail erased. The stranger stood not far off, crouched near the creek that trickled down through the rocks. He was cleaning a rabbit, small, lean, barely enough meat to feed one, let alone four. But it was something. He caught her watching and held up another snare. More out there, he said. Laura nodded. You catch it, I'll cook it. His face didn't change, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something lighter. Back at the fire, she worked with what he gave her. Salted the meat with ash. Used a flattened rock as a pan. She roasted roots he'd foraged and tried not to burn the meal. Jamie and Tommy woke to the smell of it, both groggy but wide-eyed. Tommy dove into the food like he hadn't eaten in days. Jamie slowed just long enough to look at the man. Who are you? The stranger didn't answer. Laura stepped in. He's a friend. Jamie raised an eyebrow, chewing slowly. The stranger didn't disagree. After breakfast, Jamie and Tommy played near the stream, tossing pebbles and trying to catch water bugs on sticks. Their laughter filled the clearing, thin at first, but real. Laura sat on a low boulder, hands wrapped around her knees, watching them. You good with kids, she said to the stranger. He was fletching a small arrow from a branch and didn't look up. Had one. Her head turned sharply. Had? He paused. Then resumed shaving the wood. Girl. 6. Fever took her. Wife died same winter. Laura didn't speak. Didn't need to. The words lingered in the cold air. I walked west after that, he said. Didn't stop walking for a long time. Laura's voice was gentle. What were you looking for? He looked at her. Nothing. She nodded, understanding more in that answer than she could say. Later that day, as they packed up to move, fire doused, prints covered, Laura felt a strange calm settle in her chest. Not safety, exactly. But something close. A small thread of hope. A fragile ribbon in a brutal wind. The stranger carried Tommy most of the way. Jamie marched beside them, watching the trees like he was mimicking the man's every move. Laura brought up the rear, her ankle still tender but walkable. As they crossed a rise, Laura stopped. Looked back. Smoke. Faint but rising from beyond the hills. She squinted. Someone's on our trail. The stranger didn't speak, but his hand went to the rifle. Laura stepped closer. What do we do? He didn't answer right away. Then? We keep moving. I'll buy you time if I need to. No, she said firmly. We stay together. His eyes lingered on her, then shifted to the boys. You sure? She nodded. I've been alone before. I don't want to be again. A beat passed. Then he nodded. They turned forward once more, stepping into the trees. The wind shifted again. Danger still chased them. But now, for the first time, they weren't running without purpose. They were walking with someone. Someone who had nothing, and yet somehow, gave more than anyone else ever had. Laura didn't know his past. She didn't even know his name. But she trusted the way he looked at her children, as if they still had a future. The sky darkened by midday. A gray weight hung over the hills, flattening the light and muffling the land. They'd followed a dry creek bed for hours, its banks winding between frostbitten pines and skeletal cottonwoods. The stranger walked ahead, one hand resting on the strap of his rifle, the other holding a crude walking stick he'd carved from a pine branch for Jamie. The boy had limped a little since morning, blisters on both feet, but hadn't said a word about it. Tommy clung to Laura's coat, too tired to chatter, too cold to do more than keep moving. The stranger stopped. Laura almost walked into him, her breath clouding around her mouth. What is it? She whispered. He didn't answer. Just raised one hand and tilted his head toward the trees. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. No birds. No rustling. Even the wind had pulled back, like it didn't want to disturb what was coming. Then it came. A low, guttural sound from the shadows. A growl. Not close, but not far enough. Tommy whimpered. Laura's arm instinctively went around his shoulders. Jamie stiffened, fingers tightening on the walking stick. The stranger knelt slowly and drew a circle in the dirt with his knife. 3 parallel lines crossed through it. Wolves. He stood and looked down the trail they'd come from. Then the trees around them. They've been tracking us since sunrise, he said quietly. How many? Laura asked. Hard to say. 4. Maybe 5. Jamie swallowed hard. What do we do? We keep moving. Fast. Stay close. He turned off the creek bed and led them uphill, into thicker brush. Each step was deliberate, silent. He moved like a man who knew how predators thought, where they circled, how they tested the edge of safety. Laura followed with the boys, her heart pounding. Every few yards, she looked back, seeing nothing. But the growls came again, closer this time, echoing off stone. The ground steepened. Snow clung to the roots and rocks. Laura slipped once, catching herself on a twisted pine. Jamie fell to one knee but scrambled up. The stranger didn't look back, but his pace never outstripped theirs. He was gauging terrain, time, threat. Then came the first snarl, sharp and near. Laura turned just in time to see a blur of gray muscle leap from the brush. "Get down," the stranger barked. Laura threw herself over the boys. The rifle cracked like thunder. Once. Then again. The wolf yelped, tumbled midair, and slammed into the earth a yard from her feet. Blood pooled fast beneath its ribs. Its eyes were wild and glassy. Then silence again. The stranger chambered another round. He didn't blink. "That was a scout," he said. Laura's breath came fast and ragged. "There are more. They'll circle. Try to drive us." "To where?" He glanced up the slope. "Where they want us." They pressed on. The path grew narrower, forcing them single file. The trees thinned as they neared a ridgeline. From there, the land dropped into a low basin, dense woods, thick snow. Hard to navigate. Easier to trap someone in. The stranger stopped near a bend in the trail. It opened onto a shallow rock shelf, almost flat, with a sheer drop on the far side. He turned to Laura. "We hold here." Laura hesitated. "Shouldn't we run?" "No. They'll push us straight into the basin. We'll be surrounded before nightfall." Jamie stepped forward. "We can help." The man looked at him. Not as a child, but as someone offering truth. He nodded once. "Watch your brother. Keep him down. Stay behind the rock line." Jamie pulled Tommy into the crook of the stone shelf and crouched beside him, gripping the stick like it was a saber. Laura crouched near them, heart pounding. The stranger stood alone, just a few paces ahead, rifle aimed toward the tree lean. His breath steamed from his nose. His eyes didn't blink. Then they came. Not a single pack. Just shapes. Flashes of gray between trees. Eyes glinting, low to the ground. Hungry. The first came fast, zigzagging through brush. He fired. The shot echoed like a whip crack. One fell. But another bolted from the side, quicker. The man spun. Too late. It hit him at the thigh, teeth sinking deep. He staggered, growled something guttural, and swung the rifle stock hard. The wolf yelped, released, then tried again, but the man drove his knife straight into its chest. It twisted and died against his boots. Blood, his blood, poured down his leg. Laura surged forward. "Stay with the boys," he snapped. She froze. He dropped to one knee, breathing hard, teeth clenched. Another growl. This one came from behind them. Laura turned. The third wolf, leaner, meaner, its fur matted with snow, was stalking low toward the rock where Jamie and Tommy hid. She didn't think. She grabbed a branch from the ground and ran, screaming. The wolf lunged at her mid-stride. She ducked, swung the branch sideways, caught it across the snout. It reeled. She backed up. The stranger moved then, limping, dragging his wounded leg. He raised the rifle with a growl of his own and fired. The third wolf dropped mid-leap, thudding inches from Laura's boots. All was still. Her breath came in gasps. Snow began to fall again, soft, thick. The man staggered forward, dropped the rifle, and sat down hard on the rock. Laura rushed to him. "You're bleeding bad." He didn't argue. She tore a strip from her already ruined petticoat and tied it tight around his thigh, packing it with snow. He grunted but said nothing. She glanced up. "Why'd you come back? You could have let it take me." He looked at her then, eyes fogged with pain. "I saw the way your boy looked at you." He took a breath, winced. No one should lose that look. She held his gaze, unable to speak. Behind them, Jamie and Tommy huddled together, watching in silence. Jamie's knuckles were white around the stick. Laura turned back to the man. "What's your name?" He didn't answer. "I don't care if it doesn't matter. I need something to call the man who saved my life. Twice." He blinked, slow. "James." She nodded. "James," she echoed. He tried to stand. She stopped him. "You rest. You saved us. Let me carry something now." He exhaled. A quiet surrender. The boys helped gather wood. Laura built the fire. James cleaned the wounds with melted snow and grit. The sun sank lower. Night came with stars this time. James sat by the fire, legs stiff, breath steadier now. Laura sat across from him, eyes on the flame. He spoke, low. "I wasn't always this way." She looked up. I had a daughter, he said. Mara. Small, soft-voiced. Smelled like honey even when she rolled in mud. Got sick one winter. Fever moved fast. We had no doctor. No neighbors left. Just me and her. Laura listened. She looked at me the night before she went. Said, "It's okay, Papa. You don't have to be strong all the time." I didn't even cry. His voice shook. Not until the dirt hit her coffin. Laura moved beside him. Sat in silence. Not touching. Just there. He looked at her. When I saw your boys, it was like watching my ghosts try to survive again. Laura felt tears press at the corners of her eyes. You don't have to carry them alone anymore, she said softly. He turned toward the fire. Didn't answer. But didn't pull away either. The night held quiet. But this time, not the cruel kind. The wolves were gone. And for the first time in years, James didn't feel like the only soul left behind. The sky was bruised purple and red as they crested the final hill, the sun sinking behind ragged clouds that bled light like a wound. Laura's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic rhythm she couldn't quell. Before them lay the homestead, her home, smoke rising thin and dark against the twilight. But the house was no refuge. The charred skeleton of the fence told a story she hoped she was wrong to believe. The barn stood stubborn, its weathered boards scarred but upright. Near it, shadows moved, shapes too large and too careless to be wildlife. Bandits, James muttered, his voice tight with pain. The blood-soaked rag wrapped hastily around his thigh did little to hide the stain spreading beneath. Laura's jaw clenched. She hugged Tommy close, whose wide eyes tracked the distant figures. Jamie stood at her side, gripping the stick he'd carried since their flight. They took everything, Laura whispered, voice barely more than breath. Our supplies, the horses. What if they come back for us? James shook his head, wincing as he shifted weight onto his good leg. Not if we stop them first. She looked at him, startled. The man who had carried them through snow and wolves was now speaking like a fighter. Like someone who had not given up. We only have what we brought, she said. And you're hurt. His eyes were steady. Pain's a reminder I'm alive. The boys exchanged glances. Jamie tightened his grip on the stick, determination hardening his young face. James crouched, eyeing the barn and the dark shapes within the yard. There are 3 of them, he said quietly. Drunk, sloppy, dangerous. Laura swallowed, her fingers trembling around Tommy's small body. What do we do? James scanned the terrain, the fence burned low, the ground littered with broken boards and horse tracks. We use the fire. Draw them out. Her brow furrowed. Set the barn ablaze? He nodded once. If it burns, they'll come running. Then we end this. Night deepened as they prepared. Laura gathered dry twigs and leaves while James fashioned crude torches from old rags and sticks. Jamie helped quietly, while Tommy clung silently to Laura. The stranger's eyes never left the shadows as they approached the barn's edge. Laura's breath caught as she touched James's arm. Are you sure? He looked at her, face grim. Some fights aren't won without fire. With a nod, she stepped forward and touched a spark to the rags. Flames caught quickly, licking greedily at the dry wood. The fire roared, crackling louder as it climbed the barn side. Shouts echoed, rough, angry, startled. The bandits spilled into the yard, stumbling over charred beams, eyes wild with fury. One raised a rifle, leveling it at Laura. James acted without hesitation. He fired from the shadows. A man collapsed, blood blooming on his shirt. The second bandit lunged at Laura, knife gleaming in the firelight. She raised a broken plank, swinging with all her might. The plank shattered against his arm, and he stumbled back, cursing. Jamie emerged from cover, his makeshift stick swung like a warrior's club, tripping the third man as he charged James. A struggle erupted, gunfire, shouting, the scent of smoke and blood mingling in the cold night air. Laura's heart pounded wildly as she grabbed Tommy, pulling him back from the chaos. The fire spread, casting monstrous shadows across the yard. The barn groaned, timbers cracking as flames consumed it. James's breathing was ragged, pain etched in every movement. Laura rushed to his side as the last man fled into the darkness, leaving behind the bitter taste of defeat. She wrapped her arms around James as he leaned heavily on her. Stay, she whispered fiercely. With us. He shook his head slowly, grimacing. You don't need me now. But I want you. The night settled into uneasy quiet. Dawn crept slowly over the hills. The charred remains of the barn smoldered, smoke drifting upward like a silent prayer. Laura sat outside the repaired cabin, watching Jamie sharpen a stick and Tommy chase a new wooden doll. James limped toward his horse, saddle slung over its back. Riding out? Laura's voice was gentle but steady. He met her gaze. Need supplies. Town's a day away. Tommy's small voice broke the moment. Mr. James. James smiled faintly. We saved your spot at dinner. He tipped his hat, the weight of the past momentarily lifted as he mounted and rode toward the horizon. Laura stood beside the boys, watching the figure fade into the golden light. The land was harsh and unforgiving. The road ahead uncertain. But she was no longer alone. In the silence after the storm, she felt a fragile hope, a chance to rebuild, to heal. Choices remained, paths to be walked. And in that dawn, with her sons by her side and a stranger turned ally, she knew the fight was far from over. But this time, they would face it together.